Michael had always been drawn to old towns. There was something in the quiet streets, the stone houses, and the way time seemed to move slower that fascinated him. He was a young historian, eager to learn more about forgotten places. That was why, on a sunny morning, he arrived in a small European town that most people had never heard of. His research work had brought him there, but he did not know this trip would also change his life in ways he could not imagine. He stayed in a guest house at the edge of the town. The house was run by Emily, a woman with a warm smile and gentle eyes. She had grown up in the town, so she knew its stories and secrets better than anyone. Michael was glad when she welcomed him kindly and showed him around the house. The place was old but full of character. Wooden beams crossed the ceilings, and the walls carried the smell of history. Emily noticed the way Michael looked at every corner with curiosity. "You seem to love old places," she said with a soft laugh. "I do," Michael replied. "They make me feel connected to the people who lived here long ago." Emily nodded. She understood his words, because she too had always felt the same way about her home. That evening, after unpacking, Michael asked if he could see the basement. He had heard the guest house used to be part of a larger estate in the past. Emily agreed and led him down the narrow staircase. The basement was dark and cool, filled with boxes, old tools, and unused furniture. Dust covered most things, and spider webs stretched across the corners. Michael's eyes moved carefully from one side to another. Something caught his attention: a tall shelf pushed against the far wall. Unlike the other furniture, this shelf looked heavier, as if it was hiding something. He stepped closer and touched it. The wood felt damp, but solid. "Emily," he said slowly, "I think this shelf isn't fixed to the wall. Look, there's a gap behind it." Emily tilted her head, surprised. She came closer and tried to see what he meant. Indeed, there was a small space, barely visible. Together, they pushed the shelf aside, though it took effort. Behind it stood a wooden door, old and covered with dust. Emily gasped. I've lived here my whole life and never knew this door existed." Michael's heart raced with excitement. Discovering something hidden was every historian's dream. Carefully, he touched the iron handle and pushed the door. It creaked loudly, as though it had not been opened in many years. Slowly, the door gave way, revealing a staircase leading further down. Emily held a lantern, her eyes wide with wonder. "This is unbelievable," she whispered. Together, they stepped down into the unknown. The air grew cooler, and the smell of earth surrounded them. At the bottom, they found a wide cellar filled with rows of dusty wine bottles stacked on wooden racks. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and old barrels rested in the corners. The space felt untouched, like a secret frozen in time. Michael smiled, his eyes shining. "This is incredible. A hidden wine cellar, it must be very old." Emily walked slowly, brushing her hand over the dusty bottles. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The cellar seemed almost magical, as if it had been waiting for someone to find it. They explored further, noticing carvings on the walls, symbols and initials that hinted at stories from the past. Michael took out his notebook, quickly writing down details. Emily simply stood, watching him, feeling his passion for history. She admired the way his eyes lit up whenever he found something new. "This place could hold so many stories," Michael said softly. "Imagine the people who once came here, what they talked about, what they kept hidden." Emily nodded. "And now it's our secret," she said with a small smile. For a moment, silence filled the cellar, but it was not an empty silence. It was full of something gentle, like the beginning of trust. Both of them felt it, though neither spoke it aloud. After some time, they climbed back up and closed the hidden door again. The shelf was pushed back into place, hiding the entrance once more. But now, they both carried the knowledge of what was beneath their feet. As they returned upstairs, Emily looked at Michael thoughtfully. She had welcomed many visitors before, but none had discovered something like this. There was something different about him, something that made her feel curious and comfortable at the same time. Michael, too, felt a quiet connection. He had come to the town only for research, but already it seemed to offer more than he expected. He knew the hidden cellar was just the beginning of a mystery, and perhaps, something even greater. That night, as he sat by his window looking at the quiet town lights, Michael thought about the secret door, the wine cellar, and Emily's smile when she said, "And now it's our secret." For the first time in a long while, he felt not just like a historian chasing the past, but like a man stepping into a story of his own. The morning after the discovery, Michael could not stop thinking about the hidden cellar. He woke early, his mind filled with questions about its history. Who had built it? Why was it hidden? And what stories rested inside those walls? For him, every hidden place was like a locked book waiting to be read. Emily, too, felt a strange pull toward the cellar. She had grown up in that house, but never once imagined there was something so secret beneath it. The thought made her heart race. The cellar was not only fascinating, it felt like a part of her home she had never known. When Michael came down for breakfast, Emily was already waiting with fresh bread and warm tea. She smiled as she placed the tray on the table. "I still can't believe what we found yesterday," she said. Michael grinned. "It's extraordinary. I think we should explore more today. There might be hidden clues about its age, or who used it." Emily hesitated for a moment. She had guests to manage, chores to finish, but deep inside she wanted to go back to the cellar just as much as he did. "All right," she said softly, "but only after lunch. I'll be free then." The hours felt long, but when the afternoon came, they both returned to the basement. Carefully, they moved the shelf again, dust rising in the air as the door appeared. Michael lit a small lamp, and together they stepped down into the cellar. The place looked even more mysterious in the dim light. Rows of bottles stood like silent guards, each covered in dust thick enough to hide the labels. Wooden barrels leaned against the walls, their surfaces cracked with age. The carvings Michael had noticed earlier seemed clearer now. He bent down to study them, brushing away layers of dirt. "These initials, they don't look random," he said. "It's almost like people carved their names here to leave a memory behind." Emily came closer, tracing her finger gently over the carved letters. "Maybe this was more than just a storage place," she suggested. "Maybe people used it as a meeting spot." Michael looked at her with interest. "That's possible. A hidden cellar would be perfect for private gatherings, away from curious eyes." They moved slowly through the space, their steps echoing softly against the stone floor. At one corner, Emily found a small wooden box, its lid broken. Inside were bits of old fabric and a rusted key. She held it up with wonder. "Look at this," she said. Michael examined it carefully. The key must have belonged to something important. Maybe another chest, or a door. His excitement grew with every discovery. Emily smiled at his enthusiasm. She liked the way he spoke, his voice full of energy whenever he talked about history. Watching him explore was like watching someone fall in love with life itself. They spent hours in the cellar, moving bottles, opening dusty books that lay forgotten on a shelf, and trying to piece together the purpose of the room. Emily laughed at the sight of Michael sneezing when dust flew into his face, and he laughed too, the sound warm and genuine. For both of them, time seemed to pass differently in that cellar. It wasn't just about history anymore. It was about the joy of discovery, the thrill of secrets, and the comfort of having someone to share it with. At one point, Michael leaned back against the wall, looking at Emily. "You know, I came here expecting only research. But now, I feel like I've stepped into a story." Emily tilted her head, curious. "A story?" "Yes," Michael replied with a smile. "Every place has stories, but not everyone gets to live inside them. Yesterday, when we found this cellar, it felt like we opened a door not just to the past, but to something new." Emily's heart fluttered at his words, though she quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the wine bottles. She didn't want to admit it, but she felt the same. Before they left, Michael carefully closed his notebook, filled with sketches and notes from the day. "We've only seen the surface," he said. "I'm sure there's more hidden here. We just need to look deeper." Emily nodded. "Then we'll look together." The way she said the word together made Michael pause for a moment. It sounded warm, hopeful, and full of promise. He felt a quiet happiness inside him, the kind he had not known in years. As they pushed the shelf back into place and stepped out of the basement, both carried the same thought: this was only the beginning. The cellar was not just a forgotten space, it was now their shared secret, binding them closer with every step they took inside it. That evening, when Emily served dinner, she caught Michael's glance across the table. They shared a small smile, the kind that carried more meaning than words could. Neither spoke about what they felt, but the air between them was already changing. The cellar had been hidden for decades, waiting in silence. Now, with Michael and Emily, it had found voices again, two souls slowly writing a new story in its shadows. The days passed quietly in the small town, but for Michael and Emily, every day felt different now. The hidden wine cellar had become their secret world. Each afternoon, when Emily was free from her work, they would go down into the cellar with a lamp and spend hours searching, talking, and wondering. For Michael, it was like being part of a treasure hunt. For Emily, it was like finding a piece of her home she had never known before. But for both, the greatest joy was sharing the experience with each other. One cool evening, as the wind outside rattled the windows, Michael and Emily returned to the cellar once more. Emily carried a small basket with cloths to wipe the dust, while Michael had his notebook and a lantern. The air inside was as still as ever, carrying that old smell of earth and wine. They began their usual search, checking bottles and shelves. Michael was writing notes about the labels he could still read, some written in faded ink. Emily, meanwhile, was moving a pile of broken wood near the corner. As she lifted a plank, something unusual caught her eye. "Michael," she called softly, her voice trembling with excitement. "Come here. Look at this." Michael hurried over. In her hands was a long glass bottle, covered in dust but still sealed with wax. Inside, something pale and thin was rolled up. Michael's eyes widened. "It's a letter," he whispered. Emily's hands shook a little as she held the bottle. "Do you think it's safe to open?" "We have to," Michael replied, his voice steady but filled with wonder. Carefully, he broke the wax and eased the paper out of the bottle. The parchment was fragile, but still readable under the lantern light. They spread it on a clean cloth and leaned closer. Words, written in neat handwriting, told a story that made both of them silent. The letter was from long ago, written by a young woman to the man she loved. It spoke of secret meetings in the very cellar they now stood in. The woman described how she and her beloved would hide there, away from watchful eyes. The words were full of longing, but also fear of being discovered, fear of being separated. At the end, the letter ended with a promise, no matter what, I will wait for you here, in this hidden place, where our love belongs. Emily's throat tightened as she read aloud. She looked at Michael, her eyes soft with emotion. It's a love letter. Michael nodded slowly. Yes. This cellar wasn't just for wine. It was for love. A place for two hearts who couldn't be together in the open. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence in the cellar now felt different, heavier, yet tender. The walls around them seemed to whisper of the past, of footsteps and whispers that once filled the air. Emily folded the letter carefully, her fingers gentle. It feels like we've stepped right into their story, she said quietly. Michael's gaze lingered on her face. Maybe, he said, his voice thoughtful, history has a way of repeating itself. Emily looked down quickly, hiding the warmth rising in her cheeks. She busied herself with placing the letter back in the basket, but her heart beat faster. They continued exploring, but their minds kept returning to the letter. Every bottle, every carving, every mark on the wall now seemed more alive, as if connected to the two lovers who once hid here. When they climbed back upstairs, Emily placed the letter safely inside a wooden box on a shelf. We should protect it, she said. It's part of the house now. Part of its story. Michael agreed. And part of ours too, he added softly. That night, Emily sat by the fire after her guests had gone to sleep. She thought about the young woman in the letter, waiting in the cellar with hope in her heart. She wondered if the woman's beloved had ever returned. The letter didn't say. It ended on a promise, but no ending was written. Emily felt a strange sadness and a strange connection at the same time. The unfinished story echoed inside her. She didn't know why, but she thought of Michael, his quiet smile, and the way his eyes lit up whenever they found something new together. In his own room, Michael sat by the lamp, reading over the words he had copied from the letter. He thought of how the cellar had been a secret home for two souls in love, and how it now pulled him and Emily closer without either of them saying a word. He smiled faintly to himself. He had come to this town for research, for history. But what he found was more than that. He found someone who made history come alive not just in the cellar, but in his own heart. As the night deepened, both Emily and Michael drifted to sleep, their thoughts filled with the same letter, the same cellar, and an unspoken question: was history truly repeating itself, or were they writing a new story of their own? The hidden letter had changed everything. Michael and Emily no longer looked at the cellar as only an old storage room. Now, it felt alive, as though it carried the heartbeat of the past within its walls. The thought of two lovers meeting there secretly gave a soft light to their own time together. Michael had planned to stay in the town for just a few weeks, but the days slipped by quickly. He told himself it was because there was so much history to explore. Deep inside, he knew it was also because of Emily. One late afternoon, after finishing her work with the other guests, Emily went to find Michael. She found him sitting at the table in the common room, writing notes in his book. His hair fell across his forehead as he leaned closer to the paper. "You look busy," Emily said with a smile. Michael looked up, returning the smile. Just putting down some thoughts. But I wouldn't mind a break. How about another visit to the cellar? Emily nodded, feeling a familiar spark of excitement. She fetched the lantern, and together they went down the narrow stairs. The air was cool and smelled faintly of damp stone. When they stepped into the cellar, it felt almost like stepping into another world. Michael placed the lantern on a barrel, and the warm light spread across the racks of wine bottles. "You know," he said, looking around, "I think this place has become more than just history for me." Emily tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Michael paused, then gave a small laugh. "It feels like ours now. Like we've given it a new life." Emily felt her heart beat a little faster at his words. She brushed dust from one of the bottles and whispered, "Yes. I feel the same." They decided to open one of the bottles that still looked safe. The cork crumbled a little, but with patience, Michael managed to pull it out. The wine smelled sweet and strong. He found 2 old glasses on a shelf, washed them carefully, and poured the dark liquid. "To discoveries," Michael said, raising his glass. Emily smiled and touched her glass to his. "To stories waiting to be told." They sipped, and though the wine was aged, it was still rich with flavor. Emily laughed softly at the taste. "It's stronger than I expected," she admitted. Michael chuckled. "Old things can still surprise us." As they sat together on an old bench, their laughter filled the cellar. Emily told stories about her childhood in the house, and Michael shared tales from his travels. Slowly, their voices blended with the silence of the cellar, until it felt as though time itself had paused to listen. At one point, the lantern flickered, casting shadows on the stone walls. Emily's gaze fell on the carvings they had studied before. She leaned closer to read them again, tracing her finger along the rough letters. "Do you think these were made by the lovers?" she asked. Michael joined her. "It's possible. Maybe they wanted to leave their mark here, something permanent." He looked at the letters, then at Emily. "It makes me wonder, what marks we'll leave behind." Emily's cheeks warmed. She didn't know how to answer, but she felt the weight of his words. It was not just history they were speaking of, it was something closer, something about the present moment. Silence settled again, gentle and comfortable. Michael looked at her, and for the first time, he noticed how the lantern light softened her features, how her eyes carried both kindness and strength. Emily, sensing his gaze, turned slightly, and their eyes met. She quickly looked away, her heart fluttering, but the warmth between them lingered. After a while, they packed their things and returned upstairs. Yet, the feeling of that evening stayed with them. The shared glass of wine, the laughter, and the unspoken closeness had left something new in the air. The next morning, Michael joined Emily in the kitchen. He offered to help with chores, and though she teased him about being a guest, she allowed him to chop vegetables while she prepared soup. They worked side by side, and it felt natural, like 2 pieces of a puzzle fitting together. When Emily's hand brushed against his by accident, she quickly pulled back, her cheeks warm. Michael smiled, not saying anything, but the small moment lingered between them. Later that day, when Michael walked through the town, he realized that his steps no longer felt like those of a traveler. He was beginning to feel at home. And the reason, he knew, was not just the history or the cellar. It was Emily. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned golden, Michael stood by the window of his room. He could see Emily in the garden, watering the flowers with quiet care. He watched her for a while, and a thought filled his mind. He had come to this town searching for the past, but perhaps, in Emily, he had found his future. The town was quiet that morning, its streets touched with golden light from the rising sun. Michael sat at the wooden table in his room, reading a letter that had arrived from the university. His heart felt heavy as his eyes moved over the words. The letter reminded him that his research report was due, and he was expected to return soon. He set the paper down and leaned back with a sigh. He had known this moment would come, yet he had hoped it would be later. His time in the town had passed faster than he imagined, and now the thought of leaving filled him with unease. Downstairs, Emily was busy preparing breakfast for the other guests. She hummed softly as she worked, but when Michael entered, she noticed the troubled look on his face. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. Michael hesitated, then handed her the letter. Emily read it quickly, her eyes dimming as she reached the end. She set it down quietly. "So, you have to leave?" "Yes," Michael admitted, his voice low. "My work needs me back. I promised my professors I would complete the report in time. I thought I had more weeks here, but it seems less now." Emily forced a small smile. "That's good, isn't it? It means you've done well in your research." Michael nodded, though his chest felt tight. He wanted to say more, but the words stayed trapped inside. He looked at her, wanting to tell her how much he valued the days they had shared, the cellar, the laughter, and her quiet strength. But instead, he only said, "Yes. I suppose it is good." The rest of the morning felt different. The usual lightness between them was gone, replaced with silence. They still worked together, still exchanged polite words, but both knew there was something unspoken in the air. That afternoon, Emily went to the garden to water the flowers. Michael followed, standing by the gate as he watched her carefully pour water over the bright blossoms. The garden looked peaceful, but inside, both of them felt restless. "Emily," Michael said finally. She looked up, her eyes questioning. "I don't know how to say this," he began, "but leaving feels harder than I thought it would. This town, this house, the cellar, they've become a part of me." "And you?" He stopped himself, unsure if he should go on. Emily lowered her gaze. Her heart raced, but she tried to keep her voice calm. "Michael, you came here for research. You can't stay forever. You have your life, your work. I understand." Her words were steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she placed the watering can down. She turned to walk back inside, but Michael reached out and gently touched her arm. She paused, but didn't turn. "I just don't want to leave without saying that this place is more than history to me now," he said quietly. "I don't want to make the same mistake as the lovers in the letter, leaving things unsaid." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the promise written in that fragile old note, the story of two hearts who had waited in silence. The thought filled her with sadness. Was history about to repeat itself with them? That evening, they went to the cellar once more. The lantern glowed softly as they sat on the old bench. Neither spoke much, but their silence was filled with unspoken feelings. Emily ran her hand over the carvings on the wall, her thoughts far away. Finally, she said, "Do you ever wonder what happened to them? The ones who wrote the letter?" Michael nodded. "All the time. But the letter doesn't tell us. Maybe they never saw each other again." Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "That would be sad." Michael looked at her, his heart aching. "Yes. Very sad." The cellar, once a place of excitement, now felt heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The wine bottles and carvings seemed like silent witnesses, watching as another story unfolded within their walls. When they returned upstairs, Emily lit candles in the dining room for the evening meal. Michael helped her place the dishes on the table. Their hands brushed briefly, and for a moment, their eyes met. Neither spoke, but both felt the truth pressing closer. Time was running short. Later that night, as Michael packed a few papers in his room, he paused and looked around. The thought of leaving the town, leaving the guest house, and leaving Emily behind filled him with regret. He had always believed history was about the past, but now he realized it was also about choices made in the present. Downstairs, Emily sat by the fire. She held the wooden box with the hidden letter inside. She opened it gently, reading the old words once more: "No matter what, I will wait for you here, in this hidden place, where our love belongs." Her eyes blurred with quiet emotion. She wondered if Michael would return, or if she would be left waiting in silence, just like the woman from long ago. The flames flickered softly, and the house stood still, as if listening to the questions neither of them had answered. The morning air was cool when Michael stepped outside. He walked along the cobbled street, trying to clear his mind, but every step felt heavy. His departure was only 2 days away. The thought brought him no peace. Instead, he felt as though he was leaving behind something he had only just begun to understand. Back at the guest house, Emily moved quietly through her chores. She polished the wooden tables, changed the flowers in the vases, and greeted her guests with a smile. Yet her heart wasn't calm. Each time she thought of Michael leaving, a sadness pressed inside her. She told herself to be strong, to let him go, but it wasn't easy. That evening, after most of the guests had gone to their rooms, Michael found Emily in the kitchen. She was folding cloths and setting them aside. For a moment, he simply stood in the doorway, watching her. He wanted to speak, but the right words felt far away. Finally, he said, "Emily, will you come to the cellar with me? Just one more time before I leave." Emily looked up, her eyes searching his. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. Together, they moved the shelf and opened the hidden door. The old steps creaked as they descended into the cool darkness. The lantern's glow touched the walls, the wine bottles, and the carvings they had studied so many times before. But tonight, the cellar felt different. It carried a heavier silence, as if it knew their time together was running short. Emily walked slowly to the bench and sat down, her hands resting in her lap. Michael joined her, the lantern placed between them. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Emily whispered, "I've been thinking about that letter. About how the woman waited here for someone she loved. I keep wondering if he ever came back." Michael's gaze rested on her, his voice steady but low. "Maybe he didn't. Maybe that's why the letter was left behind, like a promise never fulfilled." Emily's chest tightened. "That's such a lonely thought." Michael leaned forward, his hands clasped. "It is. And it makes me realize something. I don't want that story to repeat itself." Emily turned her head toward him, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" Michael drew in a breath, as though gathering courage. "When I came here, I only thought about history. About research, old walls, forgotten stories. But then I found this place, and I found you. And now, when I think of leaving, it doesn't feel right. It feels like I'd be walking away from something real, something alive." Emily's heart pounded. She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "Michael, I didn't want to say it. I thought it would be selfish. But I don't want you to leave either. The words hung in the air, soft yet powerful. For the first time, the silence between them broke, filled with honesty. Michael's face softened with relief. I was afraid to say it too. But I couldn't go without telling you. Emily, being here with you has been more important to me than anything I've studied. Emily's eyes glistened as she whispered, I felt the same. Every day in the cellar, it was more than just searching for history. It was, us. A gentle stillness filled the room. The lantern flickered, casting warm light across their faces. It felt as if the walls themselves approved, remembering the love they once sheltered. Michael reached out, not rushing, but simply offering his hand. Emily looked at it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. Their fingers closed together, firm and steady. In that moment, the cellar didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt alive again, filled with hope instead of silence. Michael smiled softly. I don't know how I'll change my plans yet, but I know one thing: I don't want to walk away from this. From you. Emily nodded, her voice steady now. Then don't. We'll find a way. We'll make our own story, not like theirs, but better. They sat together like that, their hands joined, the lantern burning quietly beside them. Neither needed to say more. The truth had been spoken, and it was enough. When they finally returned upstairs, the night air felt lighter. The guest house seemed warmer. For the first time in days, both Emily and Michael felt peace. Emily placed the lantern back on the shelf and turned to him. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Michael asked gently. For not letting silence end our story. Michael smiled, and for the first time since the letter had arrived, he felt sure of his choice. He knew the cellar had given him more than history. It had given him a future he wanted to keep. The next morning, the sun rose over the quiet town, casting golden light on the guest house. Michael stood by the window, looking out at the cobbled streets. Today felt different. The weight of leaving had lifted, replaced with a sense of purpose. He knew he wanted to stay, at least for now, and he wanted to build something with Emily that was more than just memories. Emily appeared in the doorway, carrying a basket of fresh bread. She smiled at him, a warmth in her eyes that made his heart lift. Good morning, she said softly. Good morning, Michael replied, returning the smile. I was thinking about the cellar. Emily raised her eyebrows. The cellar? What about it? Michael walked toward her. It has been our secret place, our little world. I think it's time to give it a new life. I want to restore it, make it a place where people can enjoy the history, but also feel welcome. And I want to do it with you. Emily felt a rush of happiness. Together? Yes, together, Michael said firmly. We'll keep the history alive, and make a place for memories like ours. Later that day, they descended into the cellar once more. This time, they came with cleaning supplies, tools, and paint. Dust floated in the air as they wiped the old bottles and polished the shelves. The space that had once been dark and quiet slowly transformed under their care. Michael worked on arranging the bottles and repairing the wooden racks. Emily scrubbed the floors and carefully restored the carvings on the walls, making them easier to read. Every now and then, they paused to admire a small discovery, a hidden mark, a faded label, or a forgotten barrel. Each item seemed to tell a story, and they shared it with laughter and conversation. This is going to be beautiful, Emily said, her hands covered in dust but her eyes bright. It already is, Michael replied, smiling at her. Because we are doing it together. As the sun set, the cellar looked brighter and warmer. Lanterns hung from hooks, giving soft light to the wooden walls. Wine racks stood tidy, and the carvings now seemed to glow in the lamplight. It was no longer just a secret cellar, it was a place filled with life, history, and care. They sat together on a small bench, tired but happy. Michael handed Emily a glass of fresh juice. To the past and the future, he said, raising his glass. Emily touched her glass to his. To us, she said, smiling. They sipped, feeling the quiet joy of their accomplishment. The cellar that had once been a place of mystery and secrets now held their laughter, their care, and their connection. It felt as though the old lovers from the letter were smiling down, happy that this story would have a happy ending. Days passed, and the cellar became a small attraction for visitors of the guest house. People came to see the restored bottles, the carvings, and the warm atmosphere. Michael and Emily enjoyed showing them around, sharing the history and stories of the house. But more than that, they enjoyed working side by side, their friendship and affection growing stronger each day. One evening, as they closed the cellar after a visit, Michael took Emily's hand. "I never want to leave this town," he said softly. "And I never want to be apart from you." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. "Then stay. We can build our life here, with the cellar, the house, and the town that holds so many stories." Michael nodded, feeling a sense of peace he had never known before. He knew that some things in life were more important than work or travel. They were moments, people, and connections that made life meaningful. Together, they sat on the cellar bench, looking at the rows of bottles and the carvings on the walls. The space that had once been hidden and forgotten now carried their laughter, their hopes, and their future. The old letter rested safely in a wooden box, a reminder of the past, but also a symbol of what had changed. "This cellar has given us something," Emily said quietly. "It gave us history, adventure, and each other." Michael squeezed her hand. "Yes. And now it will give that to others too. But the best part is, it gave me you." Emily leaned her head gently on his shoulder. Together, they watched the lantern glow softly, imagining the stories yet to come. The cellar, once a secret place, had become a place of beginnings of love, hope, and shared dreams. Outside, the town lights flickered, and the night was calm. But inside the cellar, life felt brighter than ever. Michael and Emily knew that no matter what happened, they would face the future together, and the hidden wine cellar would always be the heart of their story. And for the first time, they felt that history and love could live side by side, creating a story that was theirs alone.